Eddie Papa Duke Edwards was born on February 24, 1936. He is a native of New Orleans, Louisiana, the birthplace of jazz. Born to a black Creole family with 5 generations of musicians, with roots dating back to the early 1700s. A direct descendant from the village of Woodville, Eddie Papa Duke Edwards was introduced to the jazz by his great uncles, who played jazz in the local society halls.
If you go back as far as the early 1800s, you'll find some of the greatest musicians known in the world of music coming from this riverbank. Credit is given to New Orleans musicians for the jazz. But when you find the true history, you learn that half of them had roots on the West Bank. People like Louis Armstrong himself, his family roots right here from Wootee. His great-grandmother cut sugarcane like most of us around here. In my childhood on this river road, there were halls all the way from Edgard to Racket Rash, Magnolia. There were dance halls. Once a month you could go.
In 1950, Eddie Papa Duke Edwards followed the jazz into the military, where he qualified for the U.S. Coast Guard Drum and Bugle Corps after only 3 weeks of basic training. In 1956, while still enlisted in the U.S. Coast Guard, Eddie married Teresa Mary Clay, his childhood sweetheart, in one of the most beautiful black Creole weddings along the west bank of the river. In 1958, after serving 8 honorable years in the U.S. Coast Guard, drummer-singer Eddie Papa Duke Edwards enrolled into Berklee College of Music, Boston, Massachusetts, between 1958 and 1961, where he is an alumni. Joining the northeastern U.S. Chitlin Circuit, he traveled up to Montreal.
Chitlin Circuit went all the way from Maryland all the way to Toronto. He put the Edison Hotel. That's what brought me there.
Do you remember your first visit there?
Yes, indeed. And I'll tell you why. We're rhythm and blues, hardcore rhythm and blues, and that place is country and western.
It sure
all right.
Was, yeah.
So we coming with all of what we're doing, and the people, they like this, like that, you know. But the Edison had become a part of the circuit, so they were almost having the blues forced down their throat, in a sense. They eventually, we stayed 2 weeks there, and they eventually came to like us, you know? They came to like us. I don't think they fell in love with us, but they came to accept us. I remember when I got to Toronto, I asked somebody, I said, well, where's the black area, you know? Because in most American cities, you can say that and they could point. And everybody was scratching their head. It's like, well, I don't know, we don't have it. Well, you can go to Spadina. Go to Spadina and Dundas. Yeah, what's over there? Well, there's a barber shop, and I know I've seen a bunch of them over there. And I get over there, that's all it is. It's a barber shop. It's really a barber shop, okay. This is it, all right. Well, that was my hello to Toronto, you know.
So at the time, Toronto was maybe not really accustomed to...
No, it was brand new. It was brand new. It was country and western.
Toronto was country and western.
Basically, yeah, it was country and western.
Young Street was a country and western.
Pretty much. You know, we did some of, what's his face, too? Was forced to do some of his music. He's western, but down here he was quite popular. Hank Williams. We played a lot of, we played a lot of Hank Williams songs.
You had to play Hank Williams to kind of fit the club?
We had to stay there and not get beat up.
In 1962, Eddie Papa Duke Edwards was invited to join the Great Sun Ra Orchestra. This orchestra consisted of some of the greatest jazz musicians of our time. John Gilmore, tenor sax, Pat Patrick, alto sax, Ronnie Boykins, bass violin, and of course, the Great Sun Ra at the piano, with an ongoing host of guest musicians. In 1964, Eddie Papaduke Edwards retired from the Sun Ra Orchestra. The same year was introduced to booking agent Ron Scribner, and together they formed a company named Music Canada to promote local talent in Toronto. Serving as musical director, Eddie Papaduke Edwards created, produced, wrote music, groomed, managed, and worked with some of the finest musical groups ever to leave Toronto, Canada. The Guess Who, Ronnie Hawkins and the Hawks, who later became Levon and the Hawks. Bob Dylan picked the band up and they became the leader and voice of Blood, Sweat and Tears, and many more. These young musicians served as the pillow stone of the rock music movement coming out of Canada in the 60s and 70s and on into the 80s. One of the bands they worked with was R&B outfit John and Lee and the Checkmates. Edwards became the group's manager and musical director, as well as provider of material, composing the track Pork Chops, which graced the B-side of the band's lone single, Bring It Down Front. In mid-1967, Edwards parted company with the group and returned to Montreal, where he served as musical director for the 1967 Canadian World Fair Exposition, Expo 67. Also that year, Eddie Papaduke Edwards signed a recording contract with U.S. label Prestige Records. The ambitious experimental jazz group he created was called Duke Edwards and the Young Ones. This group went on to record 3 albums worth of music, an entire 32 hours of music created by Eddie Papaduke Edwards, releasing their first album in 1967, introducing Duke Edwards and the Young Ones. It was the release of this compilation that Eddie Papaduke Edwards received his first Serious Music Award from the University of Toronto for his musical compositions and lyrical presentations of the prestige recording, Is It Too Late? In August 1969, Eddie Papaduke Edwards signed a recording contract with Elektra Records to join the group Rhinoceros. With Rhinoceros, Eddie Papaduke Edwards composed, recorded, and performed to standing room only audiences at Carnegie Hall and drew 22,000 people in Madison Square Garden. The group drew 45,000 to Randall's Island and performed in 5 movies, countless television shows, and traveled the globe.
Do you really believe that better times are coming? Hey, dig it. You people with them lights, would you put the lights down on the people for a second? Come on, we're gonna do like they do with them old revivals. We're gonna testify now in front of the streets in New York. You wanna feel strong? Come on! Everybody, look at here, dig it. You feel you're strong. You feel better times are coming. Stand up. Let me stand on your feet. Yeah. Put the lights on me. Put the lights up there. I look at you and feel you. Put the lights on the people, man. You got it. Yes, sir. Strong. Dig it. We're gonna get you to sing now. Are you folks 2 feet out singing? You dig it? We saying better times are coming. Can you dig that? Can you dig that? Can you dig that? Come on now. Better times are coming. Everybody out. Better times are coming. Better times.
Edwards remained with Rhinoceros until the summer of 1970, when he dropped out to pursue other projects. Satisfied with his musical achievements, for the first time, Edwards decided to give back. In 1972, Eddie Papaduke Edwards retired from the music industry and created a traveling communal group called the Mud People. This group was made up of university professors, an attorney, and a doctor, totaling 16 in all. The purpose of this group was to teach universal brotherhood, New Orleans jazz, and encourage better race relations among all people. This group traveled to the banks of the Mississippi River in the parish of St. John in the town of Wallace, Louisiana, to work in the community with the objective to create better race relations between people of all races. This 22-month experience proved to be an overwhelming success, climaxing with a 3-day musical festival that drew more than 32,000 visitors to the riverbank. At the climax of the Mud People Group experience, Edwards returned to Hollywood and signed on as composer-writer for 20th Century Fox. Eddie Papaduke Edwards remained in this position, participating in more than 37 major film projects. In 1985, Eddie Papaduke Edwards returned to New Orleans after a successful film writing career and created the Louis Armstrong Foundation, Inc., in honor of a 1965 request made by Lucille Armstrong, wife of the great Louis Armstrong, friends of Eddie Edwards since age 10. Established as a civic nonprofit, C3 corporation with membership around the world, the Louis Armstrong Foundation, Inc., New Orleans, Louisiana, has touched the lives of thousands of school children and international visitors alike. Its award-winning presentations, workshops, and clinics have thrilled audiences from around the globe. The objective to fulfill the dreams of Mr. Louis Daniel Armstrong to give back to the underprivileged through sharing the knowledge, love, and most of all, the jazz with the people. For the past 31 years, Eddie Edwards has served as president of the Louis Armstrong Foundation, Inc. From 1985 to 1990, Eddie Papaduke Edwards served as chairman of the board of directors for the Friends of the William Ransom Hogan Jazz Archive, Tulane University curator Kurt Jerde. During the same period between 1987 and 1993, Eddie Papaduke Edwards served as assistant curator for the Louisiana State Museum, curator Don Marquis, museum director Jim Sefcik. While serving as assistant curator for the Louisiana State Museum, Eddie Edwards produced a historical jazz series made for television entitled New Orleans Jazz: The First Days, that featured jazz historian L. Rose, author of the books New Orleans Jazz, The Family Album, Storyville, and I Remember Jazz. Dr. William Russell of the William Russell Collection, Dick Allen, former curator of the William Ransom Hogan Archives, Tulane University, Don Marquis, author of the book In Search of Buddy Bolden, and a host of jazz historians from around the world. For 12 years, the Jazz the First Days television series was used extensively throughout the Louisiana school system to teach school students New Orleans jazz history. By the winter of 1988, the extensive work fostered by Eddie Papaduke Edwards and Jay Emery of the Louis Armstrong Foundation, Inc., was featured on the cover of the New Orleans Jazz Club periodical, The Second Line. In the accompanying article, Don Marquis, curator for the Louisiana State Museum, praised the work of the Louis Armstrong Foundation, Inc. for their assistance with cataloging, listing, and preparing nearly 3,000 recordings in addition to cataloging 10,000 photographs, a Christmas card collection, and reel-to-reel tapes. Special emphasis was placed on the Young Ambassador program, which consisted of students ages 8 to 13 years of age, to whom Edwards had his team of volunteers tutor about the old U.S. Mint, the city, New Orleans jazz, and reading music. In January of 1990, Eddie Papaduke Edwards was inducted into the International Association of Jazz Educators Hall of Fame for his total dedication to jazz, jazz education, and the IAJE. With the support of the Aquarium of America, Eddie Papaduke Edwards produced the first 3-day Louis Armstrong Classic Jazz Festival held at Waldenburg Park, September 14th through the 16th, 1990. The festival was an overwhelming success, entertaining many thousands of visitors from around the world. Eddie Papaduke Edwards created the first New Orleans jazz tour entitled Jazz the First Days. the tour provided more than 170 registered jazz sites, covering more than 100 years of New Orleans jazz history. Additionally, the tour served as a training grounds for the music teachers of the Louisiana school system and training of docents for the Louisiana State Tour Guide. This exhibit, representing more than 100 years of New Orleans jazz history, has been seen by over 19 million visitors. The Jazz the First Days photo exhibit was a major contributor in collecting signatures securing the first Stamp Day commemoration celebration for the city of New Orleans. Eddie Papaduke Edwards in 1994, working in conjunction with the mayor's office and the New Orleans Police Department addressing the growing epidemic of teenage murders, one-on-one problem, created the Horns and Drums for Guns project. The results of his efforts yield a 45% drop in teenage murders. Eddie Papaduke Edwards created the Louis Armstrong Foundation, Inc. children's workshop entitled Jazz the First Days. Held at the old U.S. Mint building, this 2-hour program designed to teach New Orleans jazz history, period 1895 to 1939, touched the lives of thousands of young students across the state of Louisiana. In 1995, Eddie Papaduke Edwards wrote and produced the theatrical production New Orleans Jubilee. Choreographed by Louisiana choreographer Robin Parson, New Orleans Jubilee told the story of the free-spirited women who danced to jazz until the mass exodus of New Orleans' finest musicians and dancers following the closing of the New Orleans Red Light District Storyville. Eddie Papaduke Edwards, Don Marquis, and William Farrell, working with the U.S. Postal Service, spearheaded the campaign for the issuing of the first Louis Armstrong stamp, formally issued September 1st, 1995. This project took 10 years of lobbying and the collection of more than 40,000 signatures. Eddie Papaduke Edwards in 1997, working in conjunction with the mayor's office and the Louisiana school system, produced the ongoing project entitled Put the Arts Back into the Louisiana School System. Among some of its notable recipients are Troy Andrews, better known as Trombone Shorty, jazz, folk, classical cellist, and composer Malcolm Parson, and the late Travis Hill, better known as Trumpet Black, who were as young as 10 years of age when Eddie Papaduke Edwards mentored them. Also, the same year, the Honorable Mark H. Morial, Mayor of the City of New Orleans, awarded Eddie Papaduke Edwards a proclamation, an appreciation for perpetuating the legacy of New Orleans arts and culture, declaring February 20th, 1997, Louis Armstrong Foundation, Inc. Day. In 1998, Eddie Papaduke Edwards was invited to become a board member of the New Orleans Sister City chapter. Eddie Papaduke Edwards went on to produce and serve as chairman of the planning committee for the first Jala Aki Matsuri, Japan, Louisiana Cross-Cultural Festival.
God, you have brought us together. You've given us a special gift. You've given us clarity of mind. You've given us the ability to raise the spirit, make people happy, make people laugh, make people want to dance. We thank you for that. We ask that you go with us now. Get before us and guide us. Guide our moves, guide what we do, so that everybody that look upon us see joy, see your blessings. This prayer we ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.